The acid rain pounded against the reinforced helmet of Captain Marcus Hale as he surveyed the desolate wasteland that was once a thriving settlement on Gaia 4. The toxic droplets sizzled upon contact with the soil, releasing small plumes of noxious vapor that added to the already oppressive atmosphere. Through his tactical visor, Marcus could make out the silhouettes of his squad taking defensive positions among the ruins, their environmental suits blending with the gray and brown landscape. "Perimeter secure, Captain," Lieutenant Rose's voice crackled through his comms. Her tone was clipped, efficient. No signs of hostile activity in the immediate vicinity. Marcus acknowledged with a curt nod, though he knew she couldn't see it. "Keep your eyes sharp. Intelligence reports suggest the natives have been using the acid storms as cover for their movements." He didn't need to elaborate. Everyone in Alpha Squad knew about the ambush's sudden, devastating strikes that had claimed the lives of dozens of Earth Coalition soldiers over the past months. The natives of Gaia 4 had proven themselves masters of this hellish environment, using the planet's hostility to their advantage in ways that military strategists back on Earth had failed to anticipate. Marcus checked his oxygen levels, still at 72%. Before carefully making his way down the ridge toward what remained of the command post. The structure had once been an impressive display of human engineering, a beacon of Earth's technological prowess on this distant world. Now, it stood as a testament to their hubris, half collapsed and reclaimed by Gaia 4's corrosive elements. Inside, the air was marginally cleaner, filtered through military-grade purification systems that hummed with constant effort. Marcus removed his helmet, revealing a face weathered by years of combat and the burdens of command. At 42, he was considered a veteran, having served in 3 planetary conflicts before being assigned to Gaia 4. Deep lines etched the corners of his eyes and mouth, and a jagged scar ran from his right temple to the edge of his jaw, a souvenir from a skirmish on Europa that had nearly ended his career. "Command wants an update on the sector sweep," Sergeant Ivan announced, approaching with a datapad in hand. Unlike Marcus, Ivan's features remained hard even in repose, his eyes constantly burning with a barely contained rage. He had lost his brother in one of the first major battles on Gaia 4, and his desire for vengeance was no secret among the ranks. "Tell them we're still assessing," Marcus replied, studying the holographic map that flickered to life on the command console. "This storm's going to delay any meaningful reconnaissance." Ivan's jaw tightened. "With respect, Captain, delay plays into their hands. We should push forward, storm or no storm." Marcus fixed the sergeant with a measured look. "And lose more of our people to ambushes we can't see coming? That's exactly what they want. What they want is for us to leave their planet," Ivan countered, his voice low but intense. "Something we have no intention of doing. So the sooner we eliminate their resistance, the sooner we can get on with the resource extraction operation." The words hung in the air between them, a distillation of the conflict that had brought them to this toxic world. Gaia 4's unique mineral composition made it invaluable to Earth's expanding technological empire. The fact that it was home to a sentient species had been deemed an unfortunate complication by the Coalition's high command. Marcus turned away, unable to meet Ivan's gaze. There had been a time when he'd shared the sergeant's certainty, when the mission parameters had seemed clear and justifiable. But 5 years on Gaia 4 had eroded that conviction, leaving behind a growing unease that he dared not voice. "Review the latest intelligence reports," he ordered instead. "I want to know everything about the native movements in Sector 7, particularly anything related to the sniper." The mention of the sniper caused a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Even Ivan's rigid posture seemed to falter momentarily. "You mean the ghost?" one of the junior officers murmured, using the nickname that had spread through the ranks. Marcus didn't correct him. The masked sniper had become something of a legend among Coalition forces, a specter that materialized during the fiercest battles, picking off officers with uncanny precision before vanishing into the toxic mists. Some claimed it was a native elite warrior. Others insisted it was a rogue human sympathizer. What they all agreed on was the distinctive mask the sniper wore, a sleek, reflective visor that revealed nothing of the face beneath. Ghost or not, Marcus said firmly, they're flesh and blood like the rest of us. And they've been disrupting our operations for too long. Command wants them neutralized before we proceed with the final offensive. The final offensive. The words left a bitter taste in his mouth. After years of grinding conflict, the coalition had determined that surgical strikes and gradual territory acquisition were ineffective against the natives' guerrilla tactics. The new strategy called for a massive, coordinated assault on their last major stronghold, a campaign that would likely result in the extinction of Gaia 4's indigenous population. Protocol 7, they called it. Total pacification. Marcus dismissed the officers and retreated to his private quarters, a sparse room with little more than a cot and a small desk. Once alone, he accessed his personal terminal and pulled up the classified file that had been troubling him for days. The report detailed an incident from the early days of the conflict, a native settlement that had been raised despite intelligence indicating it contained only civilians. The official record claimed it had been a necessary response to insurgent activity, but the attached testimonies from ground troops told a different story. They spoke of panic, of trigger-happy soldiers firing on unarmed figures, of subsequent cover-ups. One image in particular haunted Marcus, a surveillance still of a young native female fleeing the carnage with a smaller figure at her arms. Unlike the blurry faces of most inhabitants, hers was captured in perfect clarity as she looked back at the burning settlement, her features contorted in anguish. There was something in that expression that pierced the carefully constructed wall of Marcus's military detachment. It spoke of a pain that transcended species, a universal suffering that made mockery of the coalition's claims of cultural and moral superiority. He closed the file and leaned back, a weight settling on his chest that had nothing to do with Gaia 4's higher gravity. The doubts that had been growing like a cancer in his mind suddenly crystallized into a terrible suspicion. What if they were the villains in this story? A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Rosa stood in the doorway, her usual composure fractured by evident concern. "Captain, we've just received new orders from High Command." Marcus straightened. "What is it?" "They're accelerating the timeline for Protocol 7. We're to begin preliminary operations tomorrow at 0600 hours. She hesitated. "And, sir, they've specifically tasked you with leading the assault on the native stronghold in Sector 9. Sector 9. Marcus couldn't mask his surprise. That wasn't in the original plan. "Intelligence suggests it's where the masked sniper operates from," Rosa explained. "They believe eliminating this position will demoralize the remaining native forces." Marcus nodded slowly, processing the implications. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Have the squad leaders ready for briefing in 1 hour." After Rosa left, Marcus returned to the terminal and pulled up the topographical data for Sector 9. It was one of the most inhospitable regions of Gaia. A maze of sharp rock formations and deep ravines, perpetually shrouded in toxic mist. The perfect hunting ground for someone who knew the terrain and wanted to remain unseen. As he studied the maps, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The Ghost, as the troops called the sniper, had eliminated dozens of coalition officers but had never targeted him directly, despite multiple opportunities. It was as if the mysterious figure was deliberately avoiding him, and Marcus couldn't fathom why. The answer, he suspected, lay somewhere in Sector 9. And tomorrow, one way or another, he would find it. The acid storm had intensified by morning, reducing visibility to less than 20 meters. Marcus led his squad through the treacherous terrain of Sector 9, each step carefully placed on the slippery rock. Their environmental suits offered protection from the worst of Gaia 4's hostility, but the constant hiss of acid droplets against the reinforced material served as a reminder of the thin barrier between them and a painful death. "Movement ahead," Corporal Diaz whispered through the comlink. 3 o'clock, approximately 50 meters. Marcus signaled for the squad to halt and take cover. Through his enhanced visor, he scanned the indicated direction, but saw nothing beyond the swirling toxic mist. "Confirm visual," he ordered, unslinging his pulse rifle. "Negative, sir," Diaz replied. "Movement sensor picked it up, but I can't get a visual." This was exactly the kind of situation Marcus had been dreading. The natives were known to use small fauna to trigger the coalition's sensors, drawing soldiers into traps. Hold position, he decided. Lieutenant Rosa, take point with Diaz and approach with caution. The rest of us will provide covering fire if needed. Rosa nodded sharply and moved forward with practiced efficiency, her weapon raised. She had served under Marcus for 3 years and had earned his complete trust, a rarity in a conflict where paranoia and suspicion had become standard operating procedures. The minutes stretched as Rosa and Diaz disappeared into the mist. The comm link remained silent save for their controlled breathing. The rest of the squad maintained their positions, fingers hovering near triggers, eyes scanning the surroundings for any threat. Then, a single shot echoed through the ravine, the distinctive sound of a high-powered projectile weapon rather than the energy-based armaments of the coalition. Contact! Rosa's voice crackled through the comm, accompanied by the rapid staccato of return fire. Sniper position identified on the ridge to the north. Marcus's heart rate spiked. Casualties? Negative, sir. The shot missed Diaz by centimeters. Missed? The ghost never missed. The implication sent a chill through Marcus that had nothing to do with the planet's frigid atmosphere. Hold your fire, he ordered, a decision that earned him incredulous looks from his squad. I repeat, cease fire and take defensive positions only. Captain, Sergeant Ivan's voice was thick with disbelief. We have confirmation of the primary target. Protocol 7 directives are clear. I'm aware of the protocol. Sergeant, Marcus cut him off. But something's not right. The ghost doesn't miss unless it's deliberate. He made a quick calculation. If the sniper had wanted to eliminate Diaz, they would have done so with ease. Instead, they had revealed their position with a warning shot. It was either supreme confidence or something else entirely. I'm going to approach, he decided, removing his helmet despite the toxic atmosphere. It was a calculated risk. The internal filters in his nostrils would provide limited protection, but he needed the sniper to see his face clearly. Alone. The rest of you maintain position and do not fire unless I give the order. Sir, with all respect, that's suicide, Rosa protested. It's a test, Lieutenant, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the acid mist burning his exposed skin. One I intend to pass. Before anyone could object further, he stepped out from cover, weapon lowered but accessible. The burning in his lungs intensified with each breath, but he pushed forward, eyes fixed on the ridge where the shot had originated. I know you can see me, he called out, his voice carrying across the ravine. And I know you could have killed my soldier if you wanted to. So let's stop playing games. For several heartbeats, there was only silence. Then, a figure materialized at the edge of the ridge, slender, clad in an adaptive camouflage suit that had rendered them nearly invisible against the rocky background. The featureless mask gleamed dully in the filtered light of Gaia 4's distant sun. The ghost. They stood regarding each other across the divide, neither moving. Marcus was acutely aware of his vulnerability, of the burning in his lungs, and the acid slowly eating into his exposed skin. Yet there was no shot, no attempt to capitalize on his reckless exposure. Then the figure moved, a fluid motion that brought them leaping down the ridge with inhuman grace. They landed just 30 meters from Marcus, the impact barely disturbing the loose stones beneath their feet. Marcus held his ground, ignoring the increasingly frantic voices of his squad in his comm. The masked figure tilted their head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost curious. Then, with deliberate slowness, they raised their sniper rifle and aimed it directly at Marcus's chest. Time seemed to stretch. Marcus made no move for his weapon. If he was wrong, if he had misread the situation, he would die here on this toxic rock, far from Earth and anything he had ever cared about. The ghost's finger moved to the trigger, and then chaos erupted. A massive explosion rocked the ridge behind them, sending cascades of rock tumbling down. The native stronghold that had been their target was engulfed in flames, the shock wave rippling through the ravine. What the hell was that? Marcus demanded into his comm, momentarily distracted. Orbital strike, sir. Ivan's voice replied, a note of grim satisfaction evident. Command authorized preliminary bombardment of all native positions in Sector 9. Without confirmation, without evacuation of potential survivors for interrogation. Marcus was incredulous, his gaze snapping back to where the ghost had stood. But the masked figure was already moving, not toward Marcus, but back toward the burning stronghold, their movements desperate rather than calculated now. Without thinking, Marcus followed, ignoring the shouted warnings from his squad. The toxic air seared his lungs, but the adrenaline coursing through his system kept him moving. The ghost reached the edge of what had once been a concealed entrance to the stronghold, now partially collapsed from the orbital strike. They began frantically clearing debris, their strength belying their slender frame. Marcus caught up, grabbing the ghost's arm. Stop! The structure's unstable. The masked figure whirled, and for the first time, Marcus heard their voice, distorted by some kind of modulator, but unmistakably female. There are children inside. The revelation struck Marcus like a physical blow. Children, not insurgents, not warriors, but children. And his own forces had just authorized an orbital strike without bothering to verify what was being targeted. Without another word, he joined the ghost in clearing the rubble. Together, they managed to create an opening large enough to slip through into the smoke-filled interior of the stronghold. Inside was a nightmare of collapsed support beams and flickering emergency lights. The air was thick with dust and the acrid scent of burning synthetics. From deeper within came the sounds that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. The high-pitched, frightened cries of young natives trapped in the devastation. The ghost moved with certainty through the wreckage, leading Marcus to a section where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Beneath the debris, Marcus could make out small, huddled forms. Native children, their scaled skin taking on a grayish pallor from dust and fear. They worked in grim silence, lifting beams and clearing paths to reach the trapped children. When they finally broke through, the little ones recoiled from Marcus, their large, faceted eyes reflecting terror at the sight of his coalition uniform. But the ghost spoke to them in their own language, a series of clicks and low tones that seemed to calm them. One by one, they were guided out through the opening Marcus and the ghost had created. As they worked, Marcus became aware of a growing rumble throughout the structure. This whole place is coming down, he warned. We need to evacuate now. The ghost nodded, herding the last of the children toward the exit. They had almost reached it when a secondary explosion rocked the stronghold. Coalition forces targeting the structure again to ensure complete destruction. The ceiling above them groaned, supports giving way with terrifying finality. Marcus saw the massive beam falling directly toward one of the small native children who had frozen in fear. Without hesitation, the ghost launched forward, shoving the child clear, but taking the full impact of the beam across her upper body. She crumpled beneath it, the sleek mask cracking from the force of the blow. Marcus roared in denial, rushing to her side. With strength born of desperation, he heaved the beam aside and gathered the limp form in his arms. The remaining children had already fled outside, leaving him alone with the fallen ghost. He could feel her labored breathing through the damaged environmental suit, see the dark liquid seeping from beneath the cracked mask. With careful movements, he carried her toward the exit, each step a race against the collapsing structure. They emerged into the acid rain, just as the remainder of the stronghold gave way, a plume of dust and debris erupting behind them. Marcus continued moving, seeking shelter beneath an overhanging rock formation where the worst of the rain was blocked. Only then did he assess the ghost's injuries. The beam had crushed much of her left side, and even through the suit, he could tell that multiple ribs were broken, likely puncturing internal organs. The kind of injuries that were fatal without immediate, advanced medical intervention. Intervention that was light years away on a coalition medical ship. As if sensing his grim evaluation, the ghost stirred in his arms. One hand rose shakily to touch the cracked mask. I always wondered, she said, her voice weak even through the modulator, if it would be you who finally saw my face. Marcus swallowed hard, emotion threatening to overwhelm his military discipline. Why didn't you kill me? All those opportunities? Why? A sound emerged that might have been a laugh or a sob, distorted beyond recognition. Because you spared me, Marcus Hale. Don't you remember? The use of his full name sent a jolt through him. Who are you? He demanded, his voice hoarse from the toxic air and emotions he couldn't name. The ghost's breathing grew more labored, each intake a visible struggle. Remove my mask, and you'll finally know who I really am. Her hand fell away, strength failing. With gentle movements, Marcus traced the edge of the broken mask until he found the release mechanism. It gave way with a soft click, the fractured pieces falling away to reveal the face beneath. And Marcus's world tilted on its axis. The features were unmistakable, despite the years and the changes the harsh environment of Gaia had wrought. It was her, the young native female from the surveillance still, the one who had fled the burning settlement with a child in her arms. But there was more, a modification to her features that spoke of genetic manipulation, an attempt to make her appear more human. Why would she do that unless? Memory crashed through his mental barriers. 6 years ago, during his first deployment to Gaia 4, a reconnaissance mission gone wrong. His squad caught in a sudden acid storm, taking shelter in a cave system that turned out to be inhabited. The orders had been clear: eliminate all natives encountered, regardless of circumstances. But when they'd stumbled upon her, barely more than an adolescent, protecting a clutch of younger natives, Marcus had made a choice. He'd ordered his squad to withdraw, claiming the cave was empty. He'd looked directly into those faceted eyes and gestured for her to remain silent, to stay hidden. It had been a momentary act of mercy, a split-second decision he'd almost forgotten in the years of conflict that followed. But she had remembered. She had survived and transformed herself into the ghost, the most feared native combatant on Gaia 4. And all this time, she had been protecting him, eliminating other coalition officers, but sparing him and those directly under his command. Vera, he whispered, the name coming unbidden to his lips, the designation his squad had given the settlement where he'd first encountered her kind. A faint smile touched her lips. You remember, she managed, her voice growing fainter. One act of mercy in a sea of cruelty. It gave me hope that not all of your kind were monsters. Her breathing hitched, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. I followed you, learned your ways, became the ghost to protect you. Because if you died, the last hope for peace died with you. Marcus cradled her broken body, heedless of the acid rain that occasionally gusted beneath their rocky shelter to burn his exposed skin. I'm sorry, he said, the words entirely inadequate. For all of it. For what we've done to your world. Then make it right, she whispered, her scaled hand finding his. The children, my people, they don't have to die. You can stop this. Her life was slipping away with each labored breath, but her eyes remained fixed on his, imploring him to understand something beyond words. In that moment, Marcus saw with perfect clarity what she had become. Not just a protector, but a symbol. A bridge between two species that had been locked in a devastating conflict based on misunderstanding and greed. I will, he promised, and meant it with every fiber of his being. I'll find a way to end this war, to make them see what I've finally seen. A tremor ran through her body, her eyes beginning to dim. Remember, my face, Marcus Hale. Remember what one act of mercy can create. She drew a final, shuddering breath, her hand tightening briefly around his before going limp. The light faded from her eyes, leaving behind an empty vessel that had once housed such extraordinary courage and determination. Marcus held her for a long time, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. Around him, the acid storm gradually subsided, revealing a landscape transformed by destruction. In the distance, he could see coalition dropships descending toward the site of the native stronghold, no doubt to confirm the successful elimination of the target. They would expect a report. They would expect compliance with Protocol 7. They would expect Captain Marcus Hale to lead the final assault that would exterminate the remaining natives of Gaia 4. But Captain Marcus Hale had died in that collapsed stronghold alongside the ghost. The man who emerged from beneath that rocky overhang, carrying the body of a fallen warrior, was someone else entirely. Captain, what the hell do you think you're doing? Sergeant Ivan's voice cut through the tense atmosphere of the command post. His hand rested on his sidearm, a gesture that had not gone unnoticed by the other soldiers present. Marcus stood unwavering, his uniform still crusted with the dried blood of the ghost, of Vera. He had laid her body with careful reverence on the command table, her unmasked face visible to all. "I'm showing you the truth," Marcus replied, his voice raw from toxic exposure but unwavering in conviction. "This is who we've been fighting. This is who your orbital strike was aimed at. Not hostile combatants. Children. Families. A people fighting for survival against an invading force." Ivan's expression hardened. "That's the ghost. The sniper who's killed dozens of our people." "Yes," Marcus acknowledged. "She killed soldiers who were engaged in the systematic extermination of her species. And yet, she spared me." He met Ivan's gaze directly. "Because years ago, I spared her. One act of mercy in a sea of atrocities, and it created this. A warrior who fought to protect her people while still believing that peace was possible." Lieutenant Rosa stepped forward, her usual composure fractured by confusion. "Captain, are you saying we're the aggressors here?" "I'm saying we've been lied to," Marcus replied. "The coalition didn't come here for mutual benefit or cultural exchange. They came for Gaia 4's resources and the natives. We're an inconvenience to be eliminated." He gestured to the tactical displays showing the planned final assault. "Protocol 7 isn't a peacekeeping operation. It's genocide." The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Several junior officers exchanged uncertain glances, while others looked away, unable to meet Marcus's gaze. Ivan's hand tightened on his weapon. "This is treason, Captain. You're suffering from toxic exposure and trauma. Stand down, and we can get you medical attention before you do something you'll regret." Marcus smiled without humor. "The only thing I regret, Sergeant, is how long it took me to see the truth." He turned to address the entire room. "I'm issuing new orders. All coalition forces under my command are to stand down immediately. We will not proceed with Protocol 7 or any further offensive operations against the natives." "You don't have the authority," Ivan snarled, drawing his weapon now. "Command has already initiated the final phase. Reinforcements are en route. This ends today, one way or another." "No," Marcus said quietly. "It ends today because we choose to end it, because we finally acknowledge what we've become." He looked at the faces of his soldiers, men and women who had followed him into battle for years. "How many of you joined the coalition to become executioners? How many enlisted to participate in the extinction of an entire species?" His words struck a nerve. He could see it in their expressions, the doubt, the discomfort that many had suppressed beneath layers of military discipline and propaganda. "Captain," Rosa said, her voice hesitant, "even if what you're saying is true, what can we do? We're just one company. The coalition will send others if we refuse to complete the mission. Then we buy time," Marcus replied. "We communicate directly with the natives. We negotiate a ceasefire. We gather evidence of what's really happening here and transmit it back to Earth, to the citizens who've been told this is a just war against hostile aliens." He gestured to Vera's body. She believed that peace was possible. She died protecting children, both hers and ours. The least we can do is try to prove her right. Ivan's finger tensed on the trigger. "I won't let you compromise this mission. Too many have died to turn back now." "Then you'll have to shoot me, Sergeant," Marcus replied calmly, "because I'm done participating in this atrocity." The moment stretched, the entire command post frozen in a tableau of moral crisis. Then, slowly, Lieutenant Rosa moved to stand beside Marcus. "I'm with the captain," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "We need to at least investigate these claims before proceeding." One by one, other soldiers made their choice, moving to stand with Marcus or with Ivan. In the end, only Ivan and a handful of others remained opposed, their weapons still drawn, but their resolve visibly wavering. "You're making a mistake," Ivan insisted, though the conviction in his voice had dimmed. "Command will have all our heads for this." "Perhaps," Marcus acknowledged, "but I can live with that consequence. Can you live with the alternative?" Before Ivan could respond, the communication console chimed with an incoming transmission. Rosa moved to accept it, her expression shifting to surprise as she reviewed the contents. "Sir," she said, turning to Marcus, "it's from the native settlement in Sector 3. They're requesting a dialogue. In English." "Put it through," Marcus ordered, hope flickering to life within him. The holographic display flickered, resolving into the image of an elder native, his scaled features dignified despite obvious wariness. "I speak to coalition forces," he began in halting English. "We receive message from the one you call Ghost. She say, Captain Hale is different. She say he will listen." Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware of the gravity of the moment. "I'm Captain Hale, and yes, I'm listening. Go say you save her once. Long ago, she believe you save us all." The elder's faceted eyes reflected both hope and skepticism. "Is this true?" Marcus glanced at Vera's still form, a painful lump forming in his throat. "She saved me, in more ways than one, and I intend to honor her belief in peace." He straightened, making his decision. "I propose an immediate ceasefire and direct negotiations between our peoples, without coalition command's interference." The elder considered this for a long moment. "Many dead, much pain between us. Trust, difficult, I know," Marcus acknowledged. "But someone very wise showed me that even in the darkest conflict, mercy is possible. The cycle of violence can be broken, one decision at a time." Something shifted in the elder's expression, a recognition, perhaps, of the sincerity in Marcus's words. "We will meet. Neutral ground. Bring Ghost with you." "She's dead," Marcus said, the words still raw and painful. "She died saving children from a coalition bombardment." The elder's features contorted in grief, a sound like wind through hollow reeds emanating from him. "Then her spirit guide us all. We meet at sacred pools when third moon rises. Come unarmed, or not at all." The transmission ended, leaving the command post in profound silence. Ivan had lowered his weapon, his expression unreadable. "You're really going through with this? Meeting them unarmed?" "Yes," Marcus replied without hesitation. "And I'll go alone if necessary. But I hope I won't have to." He looked around at the faces of his soldiers, people who had trusted him with their lives through years of conflict. "Each of you has a choice to make, not just about today, but about who you want to be in the history of this world. Destroyers or peacemakers. The decision is yours." He turned back to Vera's body, gently replacing her mask. She believed that one act of mercy could change everything. "It's time we proved her right." The sacred pools of Sector 3 gleamed under the light of Gaia 4's third moon, their surfaces reflecting the stars like mirrors of liquid silver. Unlike the rest of the planet's caustic environment, this area was an oasis of neutrality. The unique mineral composition of the pools counteracted the toxicity of the atmosphere, creating a bubble where both species could exist without protective gear. Marcus stood at the edge of the largest pool, unarmed as promised. Behind him waited Lieutenant Rosa and 12 other soldiers who had chosen to accompany him. A small group, but a start. None wore combat armor, only the basic environmental suits necessary for the journey to the pools. Across the glimmering expanse, shadows moved among the crystalline formations that surrounded the sacred site. Gradually, they emerged into the moonlight, 20 or more natives, led by the elder who had spoken via hologram. They too came unarmed, though their natural defenses of scaled skin and retractable claws made them formidable even without weapons. The elder approached the pool's edge, his movements deliberate and dignified. Up close, Marcus could see the intricate patterns in his scales, not random, but what appeared to be intentional markings, perhaps denoting his status or lineage. "Captain Hale," the elder acknowledged, his English more accented in person. "You bring Ghost." Marcus nodded solemnly, gesturing to where Rosa stood holding a simple container crafted from coalition environmental fabric. Inside rested Vera's mask. They had cremated her body according to what little they knew of native customs. But Marcus had felt the mask should be returned to her people. Rosa stepped forward, offering the container to the elder with a respectful nod. He received it with evident emotion, his scaled hands trembling slightly as he lifted the mask and held it to the moonlight. She was Lithera, he said, using a native word that Marcus's translator rendered approximately as bridge between worlds. First to learn your language, your ways. First to believe peace possible. He lowered the mask, his faceted eyes fixing on Marcus. Why you change mine, Captain? Why now, after so much death? It was the question Marcus had been asking himself since he'd held Vera as she died. The answer came to him with surprising clarity. Because she showed me that we've been fighting the wrong enemy, he replied. Not each other, but our own fear and ignorance. She could have killed me a dozen times, but instead, she protected me, because she remembered one moment of mercy years ago. She believed that moment revealed my true nature beneath the soldier I'd become. He gestured to the soldiers behind him, and she was right. None of us enlisted to commit genocide. We were told this was a just war against hostile aliens. But we've seen the truth now. The elders studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable to human eyes. Then he surprised Marcus by extending his hand in a human gesture of greeting. I am Threlkor. I speak for southern clans. He indicated the natives behind him. Others will come if this talk bears fruit. Marcus clasped the offered hand, feeling the unusual texture of the scaled skin against his palm. I speak only for those you see here, he admitted. The coalition won't sanction this meeting, and when they learn of it, they'll likely brand us as traitors. Threlkor's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Then we both risk much, Captain Hale. Call me Marcus, he replied. I'm not a captain anymore. Not after this. The negotiations that followed lasted through the night and into the dawn of Gaia 4's 27-hour day. They spoke of boundaries and resources, of misunderstandings and atrocities on both sides. The natives revealed knowledge of their world that the coalition had never bothered to learn, how the toxic environment could be navigated safely, how the minerals could be harvested sustainably without destroying entire ecosystems. As the first light of the distant sun touched the pools, turning them from silver to molten gold, Marcus knew they had taken only the first step on a long and difficult path. But it was a step that would have been impossible without Vera's sacrifice, without her unwavering belief that the man who had once shown her mercy could become an agent of peace. We have agreement, then, Threlkor said as the preliminary terms were finalized. My people will cease attacks on your outposts in sectors 1 through 4. Your people will withdraw from sectors 5 through 9. Neutral zone established for continued talks. Marcus nodded, acutely aware that their agreement would be meaningless without broader support. We'll need to convince others on both sides. The coalition won't accept this easily. There will be resistance, possibly violent. As with my people, Threlkor acknowledged. Many lost family to your weapons. Hate runs deep like acid pools. Then we build on what we have, Marcus replied. Each person convinced is one more voice for peace. Lieutenant Rosa stepped forward. We have communications equipment that could broadcast your agreement across both coalition and native frequencies. It won't be enough alone, but it might create pause, enough time to prevent the next atrocity while we build support. Threlkor considered this, his scaled head tilting in a gesture Marcus was beginning to recognize as contemplation. Words alone not enough. Need symbol, something both sides understand. His faceted eyes fell on Vera's mask, still cradled in his hands. Ghost was such symbol. She fought, yet sought peace. Respected by my people, feared by yours. He extended the mask toward Marcus. You carry this. Show all what happens when mercy meets courage. Marcus accepted the mask with reverence, understanding the profound trust being placed in him. The reflective surface caught the golden light of dawn, no longer a symbol of terror, but of possibility. I will, he promised. For her, and for all who've suffered in this war. As they prepared to depart the sacred pools, Rosa approached Marcus privately. Command will have noticed our absence by now. Protocol 7 is still active. What's our next move? Marcus studied the mask in his hands, his reflection distorted in its curved surface. We go back to base and transmit everything. Our agreement with Threlcore, the truth about the native settlements, evidence of coalition atrocities. We send it not just to command, but to every outpost on Gaia, 4, and to civilian channels back on Earth. That's a court-martial offense at minimum, Rosa warned. Possibly treason during active conflict. I know, Marcus replied grimly. That's why I'll take full responsibility. The rest of you can claim you were following orders under duress. Rosa's expression hardened. With respect, sir, that's not happening. We made our choice when we came here, unarmed. We stand together. The journey back to the coalition outpost was tense with anticipation. They had no illusions about the reception that awaited them. But with each step, Marcus felt a growing certainty that they were on the right path. The path Vera had died to show him. When they reached the perimeter of the base, they found it in a state of high alert. Armed guards stopped them at the entrance, weapons raised. Captain Hale, a stern voice called. Colonel Braddock, the regional commander, stepped forward with a squad of security personnel. You and your team are hereby detained for desertion during active operations and suspected collaboration with enemy forces. Marcus made no move to resist as soldiers surrounded them. I request an opportunity to address the base personnel before we're detained. Denied, Braddock said flatly. You'll be held in isolation pending transfer to the orbital station for court-martial. Then I invoke Emergency Protocol 215, Marcus replied, his voice carrying across the assembled soldiers. The right of any officer to present evidence of illegal orders or war crimes to all available personnel. Braddock's face flushed with anger. There are no illegal orders here, Captain. Only your failure to follow them. The orbital bombardment of a native settlement containing non-combatants, primarily children, Marcus countered. The implementation of Protocol 7, which by the Coalition's own charter constitutes genocide. I have documented evidence and eyewitness testimony. He held up Vera's mask, and I have this, proof that there was another way, that cooperation was possible all along. A murmur ran through the gathered soldiers. Protocol 215 was rarely invoked, but it was known to all who had studied coalition military law. It had been established after the Europa incident, where soldiers had been ordered to fire on civilian protesters and had obeyed with devastating consequences. Braddock hesitated, aware that denying the protocol outright would only lend credence to Marcus's claims. You have 10 minutes, he finally conceded. Then you and your co-conspirators will be placed in detention. Marcus addressed the assembled soldiers directly, holding Vera's mask aloft. He told them everything. His first encounter with Vera years ago, her transformation into the ghost, her protection of him despite her mission to eliminate coalition officers. He described the children they had tried to save from the orbital strike and the peace agreement they had just negotiated with Threlcore. We were told the natives couldn't be reasoned with, he concluded, that they were savages who understood only force. But look at this mask. The person who wore it could have killed me a dozen times. Instead, she protected me because years ago I showed her mercy. She believed that small act revealed my true nature, that beneath the soldier there was still a human being capable of compassion. He lowered the mask, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his fellow soldiers. I'm not asking you to desert or disobey orders. I'm asking you to remember why you joined the coalition in the first place. Was it to exterminate an entire species? Or was it to create a better future for all sentient beings? The silence that followed was profound. Then, slowly, a veteran sergeant stepped forward. I was at the first settlement we cleared. They told us there were weapons caches. All we found were homes. Families. He looked at Braddock. I've had nightmares ever since, sir. Others began to speak up. Soldiers who had witnessed similar incidents, who had harbored doubts but feared to voice them. The dam of silence had broken, and years of suppressed guilt and uncertainty came pouring through. Braddock watched with growing alarm as the narrative he'd controlled began to unravel. "Enough," he barked. "This is mass insubordination. Security team, take Captain Hale and his accomplices into custody immediately." The security personnel exchanged uncertain glances, their resolve visibly wavering. "You have a choice," Marcus told them quietly. "Just as I did when I first met Vera. Just as she did when she could have killed me, but chose to protect me instead. One act of mercy can change everything." One by one, the security team lowered their weapons. Braddock's face contorted with rage. "This is mutiny. I'll have all of you court-martialed." "No, Colonel," Rosa said, stepping forward. "This is humanity reasserting itself. And you might want to look behind you." Braddock turned to find the communications officer approaching with a datapad. "Sir," the young lieutenant said nervously, "we're receiving transmissions from other outposts across Gaia 4. They're standing down. Sectors 2, 4, and 6 have all initiated contact with local native representatives. They're requesting confirmation of ceasefire protocols." Marcus felt a surge of hope. The message was spreading faster than he'd dared to imagine. Perhaps there were others like him throughout the coalition forces, soldiers who had been waiting for permission to follow their conscience. Braddock snatched the datapad, his expression shifting from rage to disbelief. "This is impossible. Command would never." "Command doesn't have as much control as they'd like to think," Marcus interrupted. "Not when soldiers on the ground see the truth with their own eyes." He held out his hand. "You can be part of this, Colonel. Help us end this war the right way." For a moment, it seemed Braddock might relent. Then his features hardened once more. "You're a fool, Hale. The natives will betray you at the first opportunity. And when they do, I'll make sure everyone remembers who led us to disaster." He turned and strode away, but it was clear from the lack of followers that his authority had been severely undermined. The balance had shifted, not completely, but significantly. Rosa approached Marcus, a cautious smile playing at her lips. "What now?" Marcus looked down at Vera's mask, remembering her final words. "Remember what one act of mercy can create. Now we honor her sacrifice. We build on this momentum and show both sides that coexistence isn't just possible. It's the only path forward that doesn't end in mutual destruction." 3 months passed. The Grand Coalition offensive never materialized, undermined by widespread resistance among the rank and file. Instead, a tentative ceasefire held across most of Gaia 4, with isolated skirmishes gradually diminishing as communication channels opened between the two species. Marcus had been officially stripped of his rank and was technically a prisoner awaiting court-martial. In practice, he had become the de facto negotiator between coalition forces and the native clans, working alongside Threlkor to craft a sustainable peace agreement. They met once more at the sacred pools, but this time they were not alone. Representatives from 12 native clans had gathered, along with officers from every coalition outpost on Gaia 4. Even Earth had sent an observer, an indication that the unofficial peace process had gained enough traction to warrant official acknowledgement. Marcus stood at the edge of the pool, Vera's mask in his hands. By tradition, he had carried it to every negotiation session, a reminder to all present of the bridge between their worlds. "Today we formalize what began 3 months ago," he addressed the gathering. "Not just a ceasefire, but a framework for coexistence. The coalition will withdraw from the sacred territories designated by the native clans. In return, the natives will permit sustainable extraction of minerals from mutually agreed regions, with shared oversight and profit." Murmurs of both approval and skepticism rippled through the assembled representatives. This was still a fragile alliance, built on the ruins of years of conflict. Trust remained scarce. Threlkor stepped forward to stand beside Marcus. "My people remember wrongs done. Many dead, not forgotten. But we also see path forward now. Together, perhaps we find way for both to survive Gaia 4's challenges." The Earth Observer, a stern-faced woman named Sullivan from the Coalition Diplomatic Corps, approached them. "This agreement has no official sanction," she reminded them. "The Coalition Council has not approved these terms. They will, Marcus replied with quiet confidence. Because the alternative is a protracted conflict that has already cost too many lives on both sides. And because the citizens of Earth are finally seeing the truth about what's been happening here. Thanks to sympathetic soldiers and communication specialists, images and testimonies had been leaking back to Earth for months. Evidence of native civilization, culture, and their peaceful overtures. Public opinion had begun to shift, putting pressure on coalition leadership to find a diplomatic solution. Sullivan's expression remained skeptical, but she did not contradict him. There will need to be official treaties, properly ratified. This improvised arrangement won't suffice. It's a beginning, Marcus countered. Something to build on. As the formal discussions began, Marcus found himself standing apart, looking out over the shimmering pools. He felt a presence beside him and turned to find Lithval, Threlkor's daughter, in a rising voice among the younger natives. "You hold her mask still," she observed, her English more fluent than her father's. After all this time, Marcus glanced down at the reflective surface. "She brought me back to myself, reminded me who I was supposed to be." Lithval's faceted eyes studied him with unnerving intensity. "Among my people, to carry another's mask is to carry their spirit, their purpose." She gestured to the gathering behind them. This was her purpose, was it not? To find path between our worlds. Yes, Marcus agreed, though I don't think either of us imagined it would happen this way. Death often shapes life in ways we cannot foresee, Lithval said, wisdom beyond her years evident in her tone. "My father says you will return to Earth soon, to face judgment from your leaders." Marcus nodded. The reprieve from his court-martial had always been temporary. With the preliminary agreement in place, there were no more excuses to delay his return to Earth and the consequences of his actions. "They may imprison me," he acknowledged. "Possibly worse. Abandoning the mission was technically treason during wartime, and yet you go willingly." It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "I can do more good by facing their judgment than by hiding. Every system needs to be challenged from within to evolve." He held up the mask. "That's another lesson she taught me." Lithval reached out, her scaled fingers lightly touching the mask surface. "Then take something of us with you, to remind them who we really are." She removed a small crystalline object from her garment, a data storage device of native design. "Our history, our songs, our knowledge of Gaia 4, show them we are not savages to be conquered, but equals to be respected." Marcus accepted the device, understanding its immense value. "I'll make sure they see it. All of it." The negotiations continued for 3 days, gradually shaping a framework that both sides could accept, if not fully embrace. There were compromises and concessions, heated arguments, and unexpected moments of connection. Throughout it all, Marcus kept Vera's mask and Lithval's crystal close, tangible reminders of what was possible when fear gave way to understanding. On the final day, as the preliminary accord was being prepared for signature, Threlkor approached Marcus privately. "Earthwoman says you leave tomorrow," he said, his voice gruff with emotion poorly concealed. "Face punishment for helping my people, for disobeying orders," Marcus corrected gently. "But yes." Threlkor's scaled hand closed around Marcus's arm in a gesture of surprising intimacy. "My people have saying, one who stands against the flood may be swept away, but changes river's course forever. You are such one, Marcus Hale." "I only did what she showed me was possible," Marcus replied, touching the mask at his belt. "She was the brave one." "Then honor her by surviving," Threlkor insisted. "Return to us when you can. Much work remains." Marcus nodded, though they both knew his return was far from certain. The coalition might make an example of him, particularly the hardliners who had championed Protocol 7 and now faced scrutiny for potential war crimes. That evening, a ceremony was held beside the largest of the sacred pools. By the light of Gaia 4's 3 moons, representatives of both species placed their marks on the preliminary accord. Not a final peace treaty, but a crucial first step toward coexistence. As the gathering began to disperse, Lieutenant Rosa, now acting commander of the coalition forces in Sector 3, approached Marcus. Transport leaves at 0600, she informed him. Sullivan says you'll be taken directly to the judicial complex in Geneva upon arrival. Marcus acknowledged this with a nod. Take care of our people, Rosa. Don't let them forget what we've accomplished here. They won't. She hesitated, then embraced him briefly. Neither will Earth, once we're done spreading the word. The following morning, as Marcus boarded the transport that would take him to the orbital station and eventually back to Earth, he carried 3 items. His service record, documenting his rise through the ranks and his ultimate act of disobedience. Lithval's crystal, containing the true history and culture of Gaia 4's natives. And Vera's mask, a symbol of transformation and hope. As the transport lifted off, he looked down at the sacred pools glittering in the early morning light. Gathered, there were both natives and coalition soldiers, their forms indistinguishable from this height. Just people trying to find a way forward together. Vera would have been proud. She had died believing that one act of mercy could change everything, and in the end, she had been right. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with challenges and potential setbacks. But a beginning had been made, a bridge between worlds that might, with care and courage, grow strong enough to bear the weight of a lasting peace. Marcus touched the mask one last time as Gaia, for reseated beneath him. I remember, he whispered, fulfilling his promise to a dying warrior. I remember who you really were. And as the transport broke atmosphere, heading toward whatever justice awaited him on Earth, Marcus felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Whatever happened next, he had found his way back to himself, guided by the most unlikely of mentors, a masked enemy who had seen in him the possibility of something better. One act of mercy had indeed changed everything, and in that change lay hope for 2 worlds that had forgotten how to see each other as anything but enemies. That, Marcus knew, was Vera's true legacy, not as the ghost, the feared assassin, but as the bridge between worlds, the one who had believed in peace when all evidence pointed to endless war. And as long as her mask remained to tell her story, that legacy would endure, inspiring others to find mercy within themselves when hatred seemed the easier path. In the end, perhaps that was the answer to the question she had posed with her dying breath. Who was she really? Not just a warrior, not just a victim, but a catalyst for change. A reminder that even in the darkest conflict, the seeds of reconciliation wait to be nurtured by those brave enough to defy the cycle of violence. And in carrying her mask back to Earth, Marcus would ensure that her final act of courage would reach beyond Gaia. 4. Challenging all of humanity to remove their own masks and see the truth about who they really were. Not conquerors destined to repeat the mistakes of the past, but potential peacemakers capable of creating a better future. It was a legacy worth any sacrifice, any punishment that awaited him. For in that legacy lay the answer to the conflict that had consumed so many lives. Not victory through domination, but peace through understanding. And as the stars streaked past the transport viewport, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of a much longer journey. One that had started years ago with a simple choice to spare a young native's life, and now stretched forward into a future filled with both challenge and promise. A future that Vera had died believing was possible. A future that he now lived to create.